Hello and welcome to today's webinar on BetterCloud's new Integration Center. My name is Jim Brennan. I am BetterCloud's Chief Product Officer. I'm joined today by Richard Floyd, BetterCloud's Product Manager for Integrations. And we're very excited to share with you some exciting news that we announced last week on some new capabilities related to integrations within our platform. A couple of housekeeping items to begin with. We will do a Q&A at the end. We'll make sure we leave plenty of time to address those questions. So if you do have those questions, if you think of those questions during the webinar, please go ahead and enter those and we will get to as many of those as possible. Also, we are recording this webinar, and shortly after we conclude, we will send out a link to all attendees. So you will be able to watch it once again on demand. So let's get started with a brief overview of BetterCloud. So BetterCloud was founded in 2011. We have raised about $112 million from various venture capitalists, and most recently, as we announced last week, from Dropbox, who is one of our main partners. We are over 300 employees across New York, Atlanta, San Francisco, and we now service over 1,800 customers across 60 countries. And we do consider ourselves a leader in a new market category known as SAS Operations Management, or SAS Ops. So let's define SAS Ops a bit so we all understand exactly what we're talking about. And as we see various organizations deploy more and more SAS applications, what we find is that in order to realize the promise of SAS, those organizations need to find ways to more easily manage and secure those different SAS applications. And that practice of managing and securing SAS applications is becoming known as SAS Ops. And in many ways, SAS Ops is becoming a movement. We're seeing many employees within different organizations actually change their titles to things like SAS Ops engineers and SAS Ops managers. And there's growing recognition that SAS Ops as a movement is beginning to take on more and more importance and gain more and more momentum. So in terms of how we define SAS Ops and how we're seeing the market define it, it begins with people and process. And so understanding how to best form your team structure to deal with those challenges that I mentioned in terms of managing and securing, as well as what skills are required for that team in order to realize that promise of SAS. Also, end user training, of course, is very important, and we'll talk a bit more later, but one of the things that we see often is that our end users, now that they're fully empowered by SAS, they also face a lot of different choices to make in terms of how to configure those applications, and sometimes they don't always understand the implications of those choices when it comes to how they share data, how they collaborate, how they communicate. And so training them such that they have that understanding becomes more and more important. Also supporting those users, of course, as we have to do when it comes to any technology or application, but supporting across more and more SAS applications also becomes more and more of a challenge, just in terms of bandwidth and skill sets required. And then finally, last but not least, change management. SAS, of course, one of the benefits of SAS is the fact that these applications, this technology is changing and evolving literally by the day. That is one of the main benefits of it. But that requires us to rethink how we incorporate those changes, how we absorb those changes across our organization. So SAS Ops really begins in many ways with people and process. And in many ways, this is a brand new way of thinking for most organizations. Now, on the technology side, I mentioned before management being one of the key areas of focus, or areas that sometimes poses a challenge to organizations as they roll out SAS. But to get down to the particulars, user lifecycle management is probably at the top of the list in terms of challenges when it comes to managing SAS. And of course, this involves everything from onboarding, offboarding, also everything in between, the mid-lifecycle management. And it goes way beyond the actual creation of accounts or deletion of accounts, because all of these different SAS applications often have their own digital assets that exist, whether that's a file object or a group object or a channel or a calendar or a sales record. All of these different assets exist. And part of the lifecycle process of managing your users has to involve the assignment to those various assets and understanding how your users are interacting with those assets or how they need to be interacting. Beyond that, having centralized visibility across your different SAS applications becomes critical as well. And understanding not only those assets, but also how they're interacting with each other is critical to understanding not only your operations, but then also any liabilities that may exist within your environment. And very much related to visibility is having some way to centrally audit across those different SaaS applications. The compliance requirements don't go away simply because we've moved away from on-premise software. And in many ways, proving our compliance becomes much more difficult now that we live in this best-of-breed world across these many different disparate SaaS applications. Application configuration, of course, and just like we mentioned with user training and users having the knowledge of the choices that they make and the implications, for the IT admin dealing with 100, 200, 500 different SaaS applications, all of which are configured very differently, this becomes very difficult as well. Least privilege access has to do with being able to more granularly control who can do what within those applications. And what we see often is that depending upon the SaaS application, sometimes you've got a good level of control and different levels of accounts you can grant. Sometimes you don't. In some cases, we see two types of accounts, basic and super admin, and you're pretty limited in terms of what you can do when it comes to enforcing permissions in that type of scenario. And then lastly, spend management. This is the area of focus that involves understanding which applications are in use and how you're spending your money when it comes to licenses, understanding which licenses perhaps might be inactive or perhaps are at the incorrect level in terms of the functionality needed by a given user. So as you can see here, there's a variety of components that go into fully being able to manage your SaaS applications, and many of these, the challenges related to them are rooted in the fact that you're dealing with many, many applications that are quite different. And then finally, on the security side, here too, we've got many components at play, and many different technologies have arisen to address some of the security challenges. I think most of us are familiar with IDaaS, or identity and access, the ability to facilitate things like single sign-on or federated access to these various SaaS applications. In many ways, these technologies, they solve what we call the first order problem, giving that initial access to users so they can get into those different SaaS applications. But just like with user lifecycle management, we have to go beyond this into being able to authorize different users to get, or to do different things rather, with the different assets within the applications. Insider threats, certainly not unique to SaaS applications, although the one difference I would point out that we see often when it comes to insider threats for SaaS applications is it's not typically so much your malicious insider. Instead, many times it's the well-meaning but maybe negligent end user. And that gets right back to what I talked about before with the need for end user training. There's so many different ways from one application to the next for users to share files and collaborate and communicate, and it's often not clear to them the implications of the choices they're making, right? And so sometimes, for example, they may think that they're only giving access to a file to a certain group of coworkers, when in reality they might be opening up that file such that it's completely public on the internet. And so that type of well-meaning but negligent activity manifests itself as a growing insider threat. And in many cases, it actually turns out to be a much bigger threat than that malicious insider that maybe we're used to dealing with. File security is very much related to that type of insider threat. I gave the one example in terms of sharing out files, but we typically see a lot of data leakages occurring when it comes to how files are configured in terms of access and in terms of sharing, and then understanding when and if sensitive data exists within those files. That too becomes very challenging across many, many different SaaS applications. Incident response, the ability to mitigate any security liability, just like with visibility being difficult across many SaaS applications, the ability to quickly respond across many SaaS applications becomes challenging as well. And then lastly, the regulatory compliance, and we alluded to this earlier, but we're all familiar with the requirements that we have to adhere to when it comes to various regulations, and we don't get a pass for adhering to those standards just because we're now using SaaS instead of on-prem. So this is SaaS Ops, and as I mentioned before, this goes beyond BetterCloud. We'll talk about how BetterCloud fits into SaaS Ops, but we see SaaS ops as truly a movement taking place within the market, and we see it being necessary to solve these challenges of management and security in a way that allows organizations to truly realize that promise of SaaS. Now, to give you a little history in terms of BetterCloud and how our mission has evolved and how now it aligns with the SaaS ops movement that I described, as I mentioned, BetterCloud came into existence in 2011. And at the time, we were focused exclusively on allowing customers to manage and secure G Suite. And actually, at the time, it was called Google Apps, one of the very first collaboration, SaaS-based collaboration platforms. And within our focus on G Suite, we were primarily paying attention to the user lifecycle management as well as the application configuration. And again, completely focused on G Suite. As the market evolved over the next several years, and I think we all know what happened in terms of the proliferation of SaaS, we saw additional tools come into play like Office 365 and Slack. And we too had to keep pace with those changes. And so in 2017, we made a pretty big strategic pivot and brought to market a multi-SaaS management platform with support for 9 different SaaS applications. And additionally, we expanded the breadth of capabilities that we were now focused on delivering across those 9 applications into many of the other components of both SaaS management and security. And then in early 2019, so just in this past February, we took the next step and we brought forth to market the first incarnation or release of our BetterCloud platform API, which allowed our customers and partners now for the first time to extend BetterCloud by connecting it really into any other SaaS or cloud application that exposed its own API. And this, of course, was to respond to the even higher rate of SaaS proliferation that we were seeing, and to recognize the scenario that we all find ourselves living in now, where SaaS is the way that organizations procure, deploy, and utilize software. And so the platform API was a really important first step for us to have our SaaS Ops platform keep pace with that. So just a little history on how we have evolved to keep pace with a very changing market. And this brings us to today. And we are laser focused on building out the world's preeminent SaaS ops management platform. And for us, we see there are 3 critical ingredients for that platform to succeed in enabling you to realize that promise of SaaS. The first is what we call empowered outcomes. And that's simply enabling you to achieve the outcomes that your business requires of you, despite all the challenges that we talked about in terms of management and security. And there are 2 primary areas that we see that need to be addressed by most organizations who are rolling out many SaaS applications. The first has to do with user orchestration, and that is that ability to seamlessly deploy, onboard, offboard, manage everything in between your users across those disparate SaaS applications, and we've got a big focus on that. The second area has to do with data protection, and so you can see some good alignment between the management and security. And for data protection, we're focused on understanding where you have sensitive data across your SaaS environment. And of course, that sensitive information can be your customer data, your employee data, your IP. So understanding where that data lives, and then also understanding where perhaps you have liabilities with that data when it comes to things like misconfigurations or also inappropriate user behavior. So we are laser focused on empowering you to achieve these 2 outcomes. In fact, it is the lens through which we develop our entire roadmap. It is the lens through which we are delivering all capability. It all begins with these 2 outcomes. The second ingredient is operational intelligence, because it's critical that you have the ability to see across your entire environment and to have visibility into all those different digital assets that exist within that environment, as well as the interactions that are taking place. So when it comes to the assets, it's all about how they're configured, how they're changing, but then again, how they're interacting with each other. And that visibility gives you operational intelligence to essentially see more clearly and take more effective action. And ultimately, it allows you to achieve those 2 outcomes that we just talked about in ways that otherwise would not be possible. And then the third and final ingredient is universal integrations. because this SaaS Ops platform, in order to succeed, has to empower those outcomes and afford you that intelligence across your entire digital workplace. And we all know that that digital workplace is growing exponentially every day, both in terms of the number of applications as well as in the number of users. So empowered outcomes, operational intelligence, and universal integrations. These are the three guiding principles as we build out the BetterCloud SaaS Ops platform. Now, let's dive a little deeper into universal integrations, because that, of course, is the focus of today's webinar and frankly has been a large part of our focus recently here at BetterCloud. And I mentioned before the platform API. Let's talk about how we're going to evolve that platform API. And as you think about BetterCloud integrations going forward and really beginning today, I want you to think about three different capabilities that any one of those integrations can afford you. The first is actions, the ability to take actions, any action within a SaaS application. The second capability is alerts, the ability to receive alerts from a SaaS application. This, of course, allows you to do things like activity monitoring, security monitoring, to name just a couple examples. And then finally, the ability to understand the assets that I talked about earlier. Again, their configuration, how that configuration may be changing, and how those assets are interacting with each other. So actions, alerts, and assets. This is how we think about integrations here at BetterCloud. It's how we would like you to think about those going forward, and it's certainly how we will be delivering integrations to you going forward. Now, in some cases, depending upon the use case that needs to be addressed, we will bring to market an integration initially that perhaps might just focus only on actions. Again, if that's what the use case requires, then that's what we will bring to you first. In other cases, when required by the use case, we will bring to you an integration that does all three capabilities: actions, alerts, and assets. Just depends upon what needs to be accomplished. But in all cases, with any BetterCloud integration, we will continuously evolve that integration by adding more actions and more alerts and more assets. And that's critical to achieving those empowered outcomes that we talked about. Now, I mentioned back in February, we released that first platform API, and it was a really important, critical first step for us. We have seen phenomenal adoption of that API across the BetterCloud community. We've seen hundreds of new integrations built out, and we've seen things built that frankly even we could not have anticipated. But as we've been thinking about how do we evolve that platform API, and especially how do we do that within the context of those three capabilities that I just described, we are looking to evolve it to the point where we can bring to you three new ways of interacting with that platform API. The first is such that building using the API can be done within the BetterCloud application itself. So with the first version of the platform API, there was a separate developer portal, and you actually went to that portal. That's where you did all the development and construction of the integration, and you kind of toggled back and forth between the two. And we wanted to simplify that. And so we wanted to simplify that by having the entire experience be such that it can happen within the BetterCloud application itself, so an in-app experience. The second way to evolve the platform API is to make the act of creating an integration much simpler, and to make it such that you can do it in a much shorter amount of time by affording you a really guided step-by-step experience. And then the final aspect of the evolution was to make these integrations such that when you built them, they had the same look and feel of any integration built by BetterCloud. And so we have just recently launched, as of last week, custom integrations, which hit upon all three of those aspects. So you can build these custom integrations right within the BetterCloud application itself. You do so within a very step-by-step, almost wizard-like approach that greatly reduces the time and expertise needed to build one of these. You can literally build one of these in just a matter of 2 or 3 minutes. And then finally, when you build a custom integration, it appears within the BetterCloud app just like any integration built by BetterCloud. You interact with it the same way. You can call upon the actions the same way. It has the exact same look and feel. So it's a really important first step, or next step rather, when it comes to how our community can evolve and extend the BetterCloud platform. And I'm now going to ask Richard to take us through a brief demo so you can see firsthand how all of this works.
Thanks, Jim. While I get my screen set up here, like you said, building a custom integration is now easier than ever, right? We're going to do it in just a few minutes, and I am going to tempt the demo gods, and we're going to do it live. So today we're going to be building an integration with AHA. It's a popular product management tool, probably in use by some of the attendees in this webinar. And one of the things to keep in mind whenever you're building an integration, regardless of whether you're doing it through BetterCloud or if you're doing it through some other application, you're going to need kind of two main pieces of information. First, you need the API call required to take whatever action you want to take. And secondly, you need whatever authentication is required to make that API call. So apologies to any of the 156 of you that were really looking forward to a live reading of API documentation, but I've already gathered that ahead of time for today. So kind of the first step in building any custom integration through BetterCloud is to give it a name. In this case, we'll call it AHA, and this is our US instance. So I've named it, I've gone in, and now I'm going to select from a long list of potential logos. These logos are what's going to ensure that the custom integration has the same look and feel that you've come to know and love for all of your other BetterCloud integrations throughout the application. So AHA uses basic authentication, so I'm going to go ahead and enter in my credentials here. It's always easier to type with this many people watching. And I'm going to enter in my password. And we're going to save it. And I probably messed up my typing there, so we'll give it one more go. Go in, select that, enter in my basic authentication. And then we're going to save it. There we go. So we've made our integration, but it doesn't actually do anything yet. What do you say we build our first action?
That sounds great.
So we'll go into integrations, or excuse me, extensions, click get started, and we're going to add an action for workflows. So in this case, we'll stick with something simple like a create user action. We'll name it. We'll give it a quick description. And then we're going to enter in the API call required for this action. Like I said, I already gathered this ahead of time. So a quick Google search is all it takes in most cases to find this. I'm going to go over to my super secure notepad that has all of my stuff for this demo. These are all sandbox keys, so I promise you won't get very far with them. Security admins in the room probably got a good heart attack over that. But I've entered in my URL. Now I'm going to enter in the information required to actually test it. So before we test our action, I want to show you over here in AHA that right now there's only one user, Richard Floyd. After the test, there should be a second one, right? So we're creating someone named Peter. So we'll go down here, click run test, and there we go. We see our test was successful. If we go back over here to AHA and refresh the page, there you go. Our second user has been created. So really easy to get something up and running. Like you said, within just a couple of minutes, we had our first action built. Now let's go take a look at what it looks like in workflows. Before we do that, I want to show you just briefly, you can actually choose which fields from that response you want to expose as part of BetterCloud's data graph. So for our AHA integration, let's say we want to tie in their user ID, their name, and their email to the data graph. So we've saved that. We can see that our extension now appears. When we go over to workflows, and I'll pull up this workflow that I used for the altitude demo for those of you that were present with us there. Show you that now, when we go to our actions, we've got that AHA action showing up alongside everything else, and it's got the same look and feel as everything that you're used to. So when I go in here, I can easily just have a nice form to tie into, say, their Office 365 email and their Office 365 first name. Again, integrations that look and feel really, really similar to what you're used to.
And Richard, for those who maybe are not familiar with BetterCloud, maybe just tell us a bit about what a workflow is and the purpose of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So workflows are how we achieve those outcomes that you talked about earlier, right? So user orchestration and data protection. In this context, I've created a workflow around user orchestration or onboarding specifically. So whenever a user is created in Office 365, it automatically adds them in Dropbox. It automatically adds them to the right groups in Dropbox, and it automatically adds them to the correct folders in Dropbox. So making sure that when that person comes in on day one, they've got access to the right files. Similarly, I've connected our Slack integration where we provision their user there and then add them to the correct Slack channel. So again, day one, they show up and they're already added to the correct things that they need access to.
Got it. So you're using information from one application to then take an action in another. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And that's that cross application, that operational intelligence that we spoke about, yes?
Exactly.
Okay.
And in the context of the action that we just built, we selected those three properties, ID, name, and email. Those are also going to be available as part of that operational context now. So in addition to all the different Slack integrations that I have connected, I can leverage the AHA username, AHA email, and AHA ID.
Got it. So that's a response coming back from the first action. Now you can actually use it within the next step of the workflow.
Exactly. So when you start looking at how a lot of the value in these comes from chaining them together, right? Create team member, take whatever that member's ID is and add them to a group and add them to Dropbox files. We can really start to leverage that operational context in more advanced functionality.
Excellent. Fantastic. All right. Great. So now let's talk a bit about community. Now, community has been at the forefront of much of what BetterCloud has done for many years. And to give you an example of that, so the BetterCloud Monitor, which is a daily newsletter, essentially a curated newsletter for IT professionals, now has over 43,000 active subscribers to it that get their news from it every single morning. Another example is the Better IT Slack channel, which BetterCloud created about 3 years ago, and now we have over 3,000 active members of that Slack channel. Richard mentioned Altitude, which is our annual customer conference. That event by itself, which we just had last week, is in many ways another example of how strong this community is. And this community is now becoming the SAS Ops community. So when I spoke before about this SAS Ops movement, it is really starting with this BetterCloud community, which we're thrilled about. And one thing that we have heard consistently from that BetterCloud community over these many years is that they want us to further activate them. They want us to enable them to do even more among each other. So it's great that they can exchange ideas and they can converse and they can do all that at scale and easily, but they want to take the things that they've built and done within the BetterCloud SAS Ops platform and actually share those with each other as well. So we have taken the first really important step with that starting last week, because we also launched the new BetterCloud Integration Center, which is a centralized exchange, essentially a single place for users to now discover and install and configure BetterCloud integrations. And those could be any BetterCloud integration, those built by BetterCloud and now those built by the BetterCloud SAS Ops community. Because with custom integrations, you also have the ability to share those, submit those back to the BetterCloud community. So Richard, how about we take a look at that, how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, I get my screen pulled up here. The goal behind this initiative, like you said, was to make it really, really easy and intuitive to do. So now, those of you that are familiar with the old connectors page, that's been replaced with the integration center, right? And let's say the community has built an integration for Zoom, shared it with BetterCloud, BetterCloud reviewed it. Now, BetterCloud reviews these submissions for a couple main reasons. One, we want to make sure that the submissions are secure, they're things that you can trust. And secondly, we want to make sure that the integration center is a curated list of applications. We've heard from you how frustrating it can be in some of these communities where you have to go in and sort through 10 or 20 different variations of the same action or script just to find the one that best suits your needs. So for the integration center, BetterCloud is doing the heavy lifting of taking the best elements of all of these contributions and combining them into one single integration. Installing it is really easy. In the case of Zoom, all we'll do is give it a name. Again, we'll stick with Zoom, and this might be our US instance. We'll enter in a couple of credentials. So I'm gonna go back to my trusty text pad over here. Again, these are sandbox credentials. I promise you won't get very far with them. We're gonna paste them in. and then we're going to save it. And with that, all of the different Zoom actions that have been built are being imported into our environment. So you can see that there's a long list of extensions here, from things like create user to delete user, group management, many, many more actions.
Excellent. And so we can both submit our own or benefit from those that have been submitted by the other members of the community.
Absolutely. So let's see what it looks like in a workflow. I'm going to go back to my same workflow that we used earlier. In this case, when we look at the empowered outcomes, this was an onboarding workflow. So now, in addition to the aha action that we built, we can also incorporate all of these Zoom actions that were contributed by the community. So again, very simple look and feel. If we wanted to just create a user, all we have to do is click that action, and we can leverage the same operational context from BetterCloud. In this case, it's triggered by an Office 365 event, but you could trigger it based off any number of other integrations. We can populate their email, their name, their last name, and things like that.
Excellent. Excellent. Very powerful.
Absolutely.
Great. And I mentioned community as really the trigger for all this, so to speak. And I should say that integrations is really just the beginning, just the first step, because as I mentioned, the community has asked us many times to allow them to share all the different things they're building and utilizing BetterCloud for. So as we go forward, we'll be looking to expand that exchange to include things like the sharing of workflow templates or policies and reports. So we're super excited about this. And as part of this launch and what we announced last week, we wanted to make sure that we were doing everything to activate that community and doing everything to get the Integration Center launched in a big way. And so the other big part of last week's announcement launch was the fact that we are bringing to market, or have as of last week, 32 new action-enabled integration. These have been built by BetterCloud, they're now supported by BetterCloud, and they are all available in the Integration Center. So to give you a couple examples of some of the things you can now do, you can create a user in DocuSign, you can lock a device in Jamf or take many other actions. You can create a meeting in Zoom, you can share a workspace in Smartsheet, even add a collaborator to a GitHub project. So you can do all of these actions and many more, and you can do those on demand via our action engine capability, or automated as part of a comprehensive workflow, much like the one that Richard just took us through. And in total now, we're supporting more than 450 actions across 41 SaaS integrations. So this is a huge step forward in our mission to bring to you this SaaS Ops platform. Again, universal integrations was that third and very important key ingredient that we spoke about. And we now have a platform that does just that. But we are just getting started, because over the coming months and quarter, we will be delivering a steady stream of additional action-enabled integrations, while at the same time evolving the ones that we've already brought to you by adding the ability to receive alerts and that capability to understand assets. So we are just getting started on this, and we look forward to bringing you many more integrations. Okay, at this point, I do want to switch to a quick poll question. And if you bear with us here for a second, we will bring that question up. And you should now see this on our screen. We're going to give you a little bit of time here to respond to the poll question. Okay, let's go ahead and close the poll down. Great. Oh, we're still going. And why don't we just we'll do a quick review here. I can tell you that we're looking at 36% say device management, 20% or so communication, 18% identity management, 15% security, 8% analytics. So pretty consistent, I'd say, with much of what we've seen so far, but definitely good validation. And on the device management front, 2 of those 32 integrations we just brought to market do fall within that category, actually 3, right? Because we've got Jamf, we've got VMware's Workspace ONE, and also Mobile Iron. So good validation on that. Great, thanks so much for participating in that question. Now, I do want to spend a few minutes taking you through a couple examples, a couple customer testimonials. The first has to do with Essence Global. a global marketing firm, and you can see they've got a pretty broad tech stack across G Suite, Slack, Dropbox, to name a few. And they, in many ways, have been on the forefront of using our platform API and now custom integrations. And as you can see, it's really allowed them to get much more value out of the BetterCloud platform. And much of their use cases do focus on user orchestration, especially in terms of automating their offboarding workflows. And so they've been able to extend the value significantly. In a similar way, Excella, and you can see they've got even more integrations attached to BetterCloud. They too were an early adopter of the platform API and have done some great things with it. And their use cases also tend to focus in terms of the user orchestration, both onboarding and offboarding. And essentially, it's given them more control. It's given their IT team more control over their SaaS stack. And that's a common thing that is important to our customers and to organizations as they roll out SaaS. In many ways, it empowers the business, it empowers end users, but oftentimes it can lead to a situation where the IT team feels like they've forfeited control. And so with these new integrations, they're able to retain or maybe regain some of that control and ultimately gain more productivity across that SaaS stack. And then finally, Upside Business Travel, another fairly diverse stack of SaaS applications. And they were very excited, as you can see, about the renewed and increased focus on the community. And they're looking forward to enabling that community to further share in terms of workflows, policies, and reports, which again is coming soon. And in the meantime, they have made great use of the platform API, building out some really interesting integrations with SendGrid and JFrog, to name a few. They're also getting a lot of value out of the platform aside from the API in terms of that data protection outcome that we talked about, understanding where they have sensitive information across the various applications, and then being able to mitigate any risk that they uncover. Okay, so last week we also announced the integration community contest. So it started last Wednesday on the 25th. It's going to run all the way through November 1st, so the remainder of October. And this is a contest basically to see what the community can build using these new custom integrations. And so we'll be giving out lots of great prizes, first, second, and third place prizes to those community members who submit the most approved custom integrations. And anyone who submits an approved integration will get an exclusive BetterCloud community shirt. And the overall winner will be featured in an upcoming BetterCloud webinar. They'll be featured as the very first BetterCloud community champion. So encourage you to take a look at this link here, bettercloud.com/integration contest. And know that you don't even have to be entitled to the enterprise version of BetterCloud to participate. So everyone can try their hand at building a custom integration. And I think, Richard, I can speak for both of us in saying that we can't wait to see what everyone's going to be building.
Absolutely. So
November 1st is when that closes. We will announce the winner, I believe, mid-November. And then we'll have that first webinar either late November, early December. So stay tuned on that, but definitely check out that link. And then also, I would encourage you to check out every week, we do a live demo, typically featuring our very own Michael Connery, one of our sales engineers. And this is a great opportunity. If you're not familiar with BetterCloud overall, it's a great opportunity to get a demo of the complete platform. So not just the custom integrations and the API, but to see what the entire platform can offer across all those different outcomes, across the management and security. So this does take place every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and you see the link there, bettercloud.com/weekly-demo. Definitely encourage you to check that out. All right, so at this point, we are going to take a look at some of the questions that have come in. And if you have not put those in, let's go ahead. I encourage you to submit some of those, and bear with us 1 minute as we bring these up. Okay, this question has to do with the various SKUs that we offer. So what do you consider a plus SKU, pro or enterprise plan? So I'll try to keep this fairly simple. We've got our pricing is based on a good, better, best type of approach. So we have a standard package, a pro package, and an enterprise package, and they vary based upon functionality. And then for every single one of those three, there's a plus version, and the plus version is what gives you full access to any of the integrations that we offer you within the integration center. So a non-plus SKU gives you access to a single integration, and a plus variant gives you unlimited access to any integration. All right, let's see. Bring up some other. I was talking to. Okay.
Yeah, so repeat the question real quick. A number of integrations use basic HTTP authentication, but this particular user is set up for Google SSO. How is that achieved? Right now, the platform API or the custom integrations within BetterCloud support only basic authentication and long-lived tokens. We are looking at expanding that to include more types of OAuth and SAML type integrations.
Okay. All right, how does it know to correlate users together across integrations? So that's a good example of our operational intelligence. And the question goes on to say, what's the common identity across systems?
Right now, everything is based off email. That's something that we're looking to expand and give you more customization of in the future.
Okay. Next question, are integration updates continuously reviewed by BetterCloud? So I have to assume they're referring to community submitted integrations. I know we touched upon that briefly, but maybe you could walk us through that in a bit more detail, Richard.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime someone submits a new action or some type of update to the integration, that triggers the review process automatically. And the integration cannot be published until it's gone through BetterCloud's security and engineering review. So again, everything that's in here is stuff that has been vetted, at least from a security standpoint.
Great. Okay, next question is, what kind of information can I get from integrating Splunk with BetterCloud? I know this is a pretty unique integration for us in terms of what you can do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. The Splunk integration is built upon the event streams that you may or may not be familiar with from the BetterCloud's platform API. So if you go into the application or the integration center and connect this, what it's actually going to do is send your BetterCloud data to Splunk. So it could be your audit logs. So whenever someone takes an action in BetterCloud, it gets sent to Splunk. Or it could be a couple of other streams like your workflow or your action engine history. Again, trying to take all of that data that BetterCloud has and put it into whatever log aggregation tool makes sense for your organization.
Great. Okay, this question has to do with SKUs again. Will the community built integrations be available to the SKUs that have access to all integrations? So the answer to that is yes. So if you are on a plus SKU, you have access to all integrations within the integration center, and that's inclusive of both BetterCloud built integrations as well as now the community integrations. All right, how often and by whom do community integrations get reviewed?
Anytime a submission or an update is made, they get reviewed by BetterCloud's internal security and engineering teams. I don't know if any of you have ever joined the Ask Me Anythings that we've done with our security architect, Austin Whipple, but he's one of the people on there. And it's the same review process that all of our code goes through that the BetterCloud application is built upon. So very detailed.
Okay, all right. And then related question, but more specifically talking about Jira Service Desk. This audience member is asking, can we add actions to interact with tickets and projects? So basically, can they extend one of those 32 integrations that we just released?
Absolutely. All of those 32 can be extended to include more actions. And like you said earlier, Jim, BetterCloud is going to continue investing in these, releasing new actions and continued evolutions as time goes on. So by all means, send that feedback through your success manager or through any of your BetterCloud contacts through the email listed here. We want that feedback, and we want to make sure that these integrations achieve the empowered outcomes described earlier around user orchestration, data protection.
Right. Okay, next question. When problems are encountered with an integration, who is responsible for fixing the issues? Is it BetterCloud or the third party?
So the politically correct answer is it's going to depend on the integration, right? If it's something that BetterCloud has put out there that we've published, we are going to do everything in our power to support it and make sure that it continues to function for you. If there's some sort of change where the API we're using no longer works, we'll have to collaborate with the third party on that, because again, we are limited by what those APIs can do. If it's something that was built and published by the community, then it will be on the community to update that and resolve the issue.
Yep. Okay, great. Next question. How is BetterCloud, how does it fit into IDPs like Okta? A lot can or should be done in the IDP. So we in fact partner with Okta quite a bit, and typically the way we see BetterCloud deployed is side by side. And so Okta, or any IDaaS solution, of course, can do a lot of the initial provisioning and ultimately deprovisioning. But for many of the additional actions that need to take place as part of the full lifecycle management, that's where BetterCloud comes in, because we have that deeper insight, that deeper interaction with all those different assets. So in many cases, the event coming from Okta will serve as the trigger for a comprehensive workflow within BetterCloud, then to go ahead and configure the authorization to all these different assets. That's a very common use case. We also receive security events from Okta. So things like multiple failed login events, for example, are received in BetterCloud from Okta, and then we can use those security events or alerts as triggers then to kick off remediation workflows in BetterCloud that in a similar way have a much further reach into your SaaS environment. So we in many ways partner with Okta. One Login, in fact, is another IDP that is now one of the out-of-the-box integrations. And it's typically that type of relationship. There's a handoff, either a trigger, and then we take the ball, so to speak, and complete the onboarding, offboarding, or it's in the context of a security scenario where we're receiving some type of security alert and then taking some remediation action as a result. Okay. I had one question here about how can I tell what SKU I am on?
Yeah, so when you're looking at the integration center, you will either see the ability to install these, or you will see the option to request more information. If you're not on a SKU that is inclusive of all of these integrations, just click the request more information button and your customer success manager will be in touch with everything that you need.
Great. Okay, next question. You mentioned Splunk. Is there any integration for generic elk stacks? So I'll say not today, but using the custom integration capability, it would be very straightforward to create that. It's basically an event stream coming from BetterCloud that you would point to the elk stack instance, and much in the same way that we do it for Splunk, it'd be very straightforward. We did have one question about the Dropbox announcement, which I mentioned at the beginning, so let me speak to that briefly. So what does the future of BetterCloud's integration with Dropbox look like? So to give you some more details on that integration, on that partnership, Dropbox will actually be offering and reselling an add-on component to Dropbox known as BetterCloud for Dropbox, in which case they'll be bringing BetterCloud's functionality across user orchestration and data protection directly to Dropbox's customers. So it's a very unique type of integration. We, of course, have integrated with Dropbox for 2 or 3 years now and have a quite a robust integration with them. We will continue to build that out as part of the partnership. Okay. And I think that'll wrap up the questions. So I want to, on behalf of Richard and BetterCloud, thank everybody for your time today. If you have any further questions, you see my personal email address there, so feel free to send me a note, and we at the BetterCloud team would be more than happy to talk with you and answer any questions. If you're an existing customer, I would encourage you to reach out to your customer success manager if you have any questions as well. And as a reminder, we've got that integration contest going on, and then the weekly webinars on Wednesday to get more information and a broader demo of the entire BetterCloud platform. So we hope that you found this to be informative, and we thank you again for your time and wish you a very good remainder of your day. Thank you.